Okay, Kyle. So Netflix has a new documentary out, Quarterback, following the lives of Patrick Mahomes, Marcus Mariota, Kirk Cousins, had all quarterbacks mic'd up throughout the year. And it kind of made me think, like, if this is going to be a continuous series, what are some quarterbacks that might be interesting to follow around next year? I wonder if they're going to kind of like stay in the same format. Like, when you think about like who they got for this most recent season, you have Patrick Mahomes, who's the best quarterback in football right now. You have Kirk Cousins, who's probably in that like tier three of quarterbacks. And then you have Marcus Mariota, who's the classic bridge quarterback, the classic guy that you have on your team for 1 year until your rookie quarterback, in this case, Desmond Ritter, is ready to step up. Do you think they'll follow that same kind of format, or what do you think would be a high priority ad for them next year?
Well, if they do stick with the same format, I think the star quarterback you got to go for is Joe Burrow because,
Ooh.
man, I would be super interested to see a season following Joe Burrow, especially if it's going to be this season where the Cincinnati Bengals and Kansas City are technically 1-1 against each other, and they're both angling. They're probably the two best teams on paper in the AFC going into the season. Yeah, if you're going to pick a star quarterback, just make sure that it's going to be Joe Burrow. I haven't seen the documentary, but from what I understand, it was kind of interesting to see Mariota get replaced partway through the season. It was interesting to learn about Kirk Cousins battling the injuries he did. I think a whole episode was dedicated to like quarterbacks memorizing play calls and like how they remember 17 things, have to process it and then relay it to people in the huddle, which every quarterback, whether you're Gardner Minshew or Patrick Mahomes, has to know how to do that. So I thought that was an interesting take on how they did the show. If they're going to keep that format together and follow quarterbacks, the first person I'm calling is Joe Burrow to see if Joe
Okay.
Burrow's interested.
Let's break that down. Just like, so the star quarterback tier, I do think that Joe would be a very interesting quarterback to study the life of. I mean, since this guy's been in college, he's been like one of the most popular athletes in America. So I think people would love to see his day-to-day life. Like you said, it's going to be a big year for the Bengals. Could they be on that next tier up? They've been knocking on the door, obviously being in the Super Bowl a couple years ago, taking the Chiefs to the wire in this last AFC championship. It does end up being the Chiefs versus Bengals again, this year. I think people would love to follow that. I actually will say, and certainly if you still consider him a superstar, if dream casting for Netflix would probably be someone along the lines of, well, Aaron Rodgers. As much as I'm not really an Aaron Rodgers fan because he's a curmudgeon at this point in those last couple of years of his career, especially this coming season with, we don't know how long his tenure is going to be with the New York Jets. I feel as though this would be the perfect time. And certainly, obviously, HBO is capitalizing on that by making the Jets do Hard Knocks this year. I feel as though Aaron Rodgers would probably be my dream casting for the superstar quarterback tier.
That's a good one. I don't know if I'd qualify Aaron Rodgers as a superstar quarterback anymore, but he did win 2 MVPs just 2 years ago. So I shouldn't put too much disdain on Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, I think Aaron Rodgers is a good choice as well for putting together a star quarterback. And the cameras following Aaron, I would love to see what Aaron Rodgers does in his house, because like a part of the show is like they follow Patrick Mahomes home, they talk to his family, they talk to Kirk Cousins' family. Marcus Mariota was doing something in his living room that went viral. Like that's part of it too. So that would be interesting to kind of see the Aaron Rodgers home life and get a peek into whatever Aaron would be willing to let Netflix show for the cameras.
All right, let's talk about that next tier down, the Kirk Cousins tier of quarterbacks. Like, who would be great to follow the life of?
So this quarterback might be a little bit too good for this category, but I kind of want to get both these people in here. I'm going to go Dak Prescott. I'm interested in how Dak Prescott kind of exists outside of football, because for all the talk about being the star quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys and consistently being a Pro Bowl quarterback for each of the last like 6 seasons, I know we think of him as like the tier 3 quarterback or something, but I feel like I don't really know a whole lot about Dak Prescott other than like that little snippet of his life, like the 4-minute clip on Hard Knocks a couple of years, maybe a few years ago now. That little snippet on Hard Knocks, I would be interested to learn more about Dak Prescott.
I'm actually with you. I was thinking about that, but then I thought about the Hard Knocks aspect and the fact we already kind of got a glimpse at Dak Prescott. That was an interesting year, too, that he was coming off of his major leg injury at that point. How would he be this year? Because I feel like this is going to be a big year for Dak Prescott. this year could be the make or break year, whether or not Dallas wants to continue pushing forward on this path with him. So I agree with you because it has a lot of parallels to Kirk Cousins, because I feel like in many ways last year was a make or break year for Kirk Cousins as well. I would mention a couple others. If you want to go surly in a controversial route, we could go with a Deshaun Watson in Cleveland. Hey, if Netflix had the opportunity to get that one, that would be ratings gold. Certainly people would tune in for it.
There would be a lot of protests to that one.
I don't think there would be. I feel like people would actually be legitimately interested, whether you love him, hate him, or somewhere in the middle, to just watch what goes on. Now, as long as they turn off the camera, if he's heading towards any massage areas, then we're fine. If I was to name another quarterback that might be interesting, just kind of like a new face, new place kind of thing, Derek Carr, New Orleans might be interesting. Hell, even like a Matthew Stafford, actually, too. Matthew Stafford, he had an injury-riddled year last year. The Super Bowl a couple years ago. You could follow that injury storyline and see how he does this year. And like, if the Rams bounce back at all, I don't know. Those might be a couple interesting names, kind of like in that territory to just target. What about that next tier down? So we're talking about kind of like the bridge quarterbacks, the quarterbacks that people aren't really necessarily thinking of, some that might not even keep their job throughout the year.
So my personal preference is Gardner Minshew, just because I want to see him doing like weightlifting while living in a van in the off season, but that's just because Gardner Minshew is just absolutely insane. The reason I say him is more for like a broader context of, I want to see one of those quarterbacks who has a rookie that has been drafted at the top of the draft class. So I'm thinking like Ryan Tannehill with the Tennessee Titans. They obviously just drafted Will Levis. I'd be interested to kind of see that dynamic. Minshew is a Colt with Anthony Richardson, of course. You could say Andy Dalton with Bryce Young over in Carolina, potentially. Like one of those types of stories is the one that would be interesting to me, is like a team that has clearly drafted the young quarterback, prioritized the young quarterback, and has brought in a veteran to maybe play at times, maybe mentor, kind of somewhere in between. I think the Minshew Anthony Richardson thing, or the Ryan Tannehill, Will Levis dynamic would be two very different dynamics, but also equally interesting going into the year. So I'd say one of those two, maybe Andy Dalton, just because Andy Dalton has a crazy NFL story and now he's backing up Bryce Young in Carolina. But yeah, I would say either the Minshew Colts situation or Tannehill and the Titans.
Well, if we want to go crazy NFL story, Jimmy Garoppolo with Las Vegas, like just passed his physical today. With all the drama that happened with Jimmy Garoppolo over the last couple of years with the San Francisco 49ers, I would be intrigued, especially too, because Jimmy lives a pretty quiet life. Like, you would not know this man exists if he didn't occasionally post an ad for the shirt company he works for on his Instagram from every other month, Mm-hmm. Like, we don't really know a whole lot about Jimmy. And the fact that like in every press conference, he did the right thing. He did the politically correct speech, especially when talking about like Trey Lance and the other quarterbacks on the roster. If they were able to get to that inside access, I think that would be a good person to follow around for a year.
Even though I know that you're a 49ers homer, and even though I know you're a big Jimmy Garoppolo guy, I do have to agree with you. It would be kind of interesting to follow Garoppolo, who's already preemptively injured going into this season. I think it would be interesting to follow Garoppolo, even though I know, like I said, you're a 49ers homer and a big Jimmy Garoppolo guy. That would be interesting to follow him around with the Raiders.
All right. So going away from the standard format, like just give me one more name that you would love to kind of put on the radar for Netflix.
CJ Stroud. Like CJ Stroud as a rookie, top draft pick, terrible organization. I'll just throw CJ Stroud out there as a name. I think he would be interesting to follow going into his first year in the league.
I'm going to throw out Justin Fields. If we're going to stick with kind of like that ascending player, this last week for Justin Fields, Colin Cowherd kind of came after him. He came after himself by putting out I'm a top 5 rushing quarterback of all time. I think following around that guy in his third NFL season, could he have a Jalen Hurts type breakout, or is he going to just regress from this point forward? I kind of would love to see that answers and how he feels about it. Certainly within that Bears locker room. So yeah.
If there's one more name I would throw out, and it would just be for the unique aspect of it, it would be Kyler Murray, just so we can kind of see how the injury rehab process looks behind the scenes. Like, people don't realize how hard it is to rehab from a major injury.
I wanted to, but the fact that I wasn't sure when he would come back made me think like, would it be good TV? You know, like if he was out like till like mid-season. Now I know he said he has a goal to be back out there by week 1, but you know, not everyone hits their goal. So I don't know if you're like your Netflix and you're like, how do we make this interesting for such amount of time? If you'd really enjoy that, but coming into this year too for the Cardinals, especially because it does seem like even if he does get healthy and ready to go, do the Cardinals really want him that healthy and ready to go? There's even that thought process going. Like, how bad do the Cardinals want to be this year?
Yeah, maybe he's the special fourth quarterback addition to the list. Is like they have their Joe Burrows, their Dak Prescott's, their Jimmy Garoppolos, and then they kind of weave in Kyler in the process. But
Yeah,
I like the Justin Fields one too. I think Justin Fields is in an interesting position this year because everyone is betting on his development at this point. This is the third year. This is when Tua was supposed to make the leap. This is when Jalen Hurts was supposed to make the leap. You know, everyone's eyeballing Justin Fields like a vulture to see what's going to happen. So behind the scenes access would be thoroughly entertaining.
if I didn't know that Bill Belichick would put the kibosh on most things, I would even say like a Mac Jones might be somewhat interesting.
Is there anyone else from that draft class that still has I mean, Trevor Lawrence, I
Well, I
guess.
mean, Trey Lance would be, I don't even know, you know,
Trey
like
Lance would be interesting. Oh, Brock Purdy would be funny too if they just followed around Brock Purdy for a season.
honestly, if they just put a camera in the 49ers locker room, specifically their quarterback room, at this point, it might make some good TV for a Netflix documentary.
Yeah, Netflix is going to be real confused when Sam Darnold is starting week 1 for the 49ers. They're going to be like, what the fuck is going on here with this team?
So wait,
We have nothing to work.
we have to have everyone mic'd up.
Yeah, good lord, that is going to be an experience if they pick any 49er. Even Garoppolo would be an experience. I mean,
Yeah.
he's clearly the quarterback of the Raiders, but I mean,
Well,
if they kind of like explain his origin story before that, it'll be interesting.
I think the reason Garoppolo kind of like came to mind too was also like Kirk Cousins. Like they did like a little sit down between all three of the quarterbacks in this year's documentary where they listed their most underrated quarterback, and both Mariota and Patrick Mahomes said Kirk Cousins was their most underrated quarterback, but Kirk Cousins said that he thought Jimmy Garoppolo was his most underrated quarterback in the league. You could work off that as like a basis for who you would want to cast in this year's version of the show.
Underrated, the Jimmy Garoppolo story, even though the 49ers tried to replace him 3 times and couldn't do it.
Well, that's part of the story. Like he's even underrated by his own team.
Yeah, I wonder why. When Brock Purdy came in and immediately put up better numbers than him as soon as he got into that offense. I wonder
Well,
why.
the numbers kinda. It depends on which numbers you look at. But
Brock Purdy was number 1 in passer rating and number 1 in touchdown INT ratio
well,
and all that
yes,
stuff.
but Jimmy Garoppolo was also top 5 in passer rating and all those respective statistics too at the time of his injury. So, you know, but yes, I will say, without going on a whole diatribe about this, I did respect what Brock Purdy did towards the end of the season. There was just things you watched on tape and you're like, wow, I haven't seen Jimmy Garoppolo do that since 2017.
Yeah, and the Raiders decided that was the quarterback they wanted. They were just gonna slide Jimmy Garoppolo in there. Basically, no difference from Derek Carr. Gosh, you're talking me into Jimmy Garoppolo on the Netflix show now. I think you're talking me into that over Gardner Minshew living out of a van in the offseason and doing crazy weight training.
I just think it would be good TV. Guys, young, single, attractive. I think too. Who knows his personal life? Obviously, this last season we just saw a bunch of married guys on the show. I mentioned Aaron Rodgers earlier. How's
So
it need to be just be a $1 million athlete and single?
So they completely pivot. They go to Joe Burrow, Aaron Rodgers, and Jimmy Garoppolo.